Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now for this week's conversation.
Welcome back to In Such a Time, Rabbi Jaffe alongside Rabbi Londy. And here, we are entering into the season of Purim. We've got Shabbat Zachor just ahead of us when this podcast is going to land. And we here at the synagogue are feverishly getting ready for the Purim holiday. And so I think one of the things that you and I have in common, I think that we have a real love for this holiday as it's one of my favorite Jewish holidays.
That we do not have that in common. This is my least favorite holiday.
Oh, I was so hopeful. Okay.
God, no.
So once again, we're going to go into fierce debate right now about pro-Purim and anti-Purim.
Anti-Purim.
It's just not one of your favorites.
Certainly not one of my favorites.
So talk to us a little bit. I thought we'd start out with, especially coming from Israel, and it's the way it's celebrated in Israel and observed is often so different than how it is in the U.S. Talk to us a little bit about what Purim means to you and what your Purim experiences have been like.
Well, I came off kind of strong about how much I don't like Purim. I actually think that the story of Purim is really compelling and beautiful and moving, which we'll talk about in a moment. But let me just tell you a little bit about what it was like to celebrate Purim in Israel. First of all, it's like Halloween on steroids. Mm-hmm. There are some Megillah readings, but people get really into the four mitzvot of Purim. So the number one is matanot levyonim, it's mm-hmm. giving to the poor. Number two is mishlochei manot, like you give something to your friends.
These are things you don't like, I understand, is what you're saying.
I like the mitzvot of Purim. Number three is that you have a meal for Purim. And number four is to hear the Megillah. Mm-hmm. Those are all things I liked. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of pressure to have your A game going with your Mishloach Manot. Mm-hmm. Like there's high-end Mishlochei Manot. It was very, very stressful to get it to
It does. There's two edible items within it has to be very packaged specifically.
It was just like, it was a scene.
Yeah.
You get a day off of school, or at least a half a day. Then the kids, you have to have like 8,000 costumes because your kids have to switch many times. And then they have festivals in the streets, and it's really exciting. And it's on the cusp of like the summer months. So sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's warm. The bakery starts selling hamantaschen, osnei haman, about 1 minute after Hanukkah's over. And so you have flavors that you've never even heard of. It's very exciting. It's fun. And then it becomes a big street party. That was exciting. All of those things, but it was sometimes a little bit overwhelming for me. But when I remember my last few Purims when I was with my kids in the streets, and that was like sensory overload in every single way. There's acrobats, there's music, and there's food, and it's like this huge street party. I remember just being able to, even in the anxiety of being in a massive crowd with acrobats like coming down phone poles, mm-hmm. Thinking, wow, this is pretty amazing that we're celebrating this holiday in the land of Israel. Like that's an incredible thing to be able to do. And when an entire country is partying, that's pretty contagious and exciting. Have you ever been to Israel and Purim?
Twice.
What was that like for you?
So first of all, I want to mention a point of commonality between us, because you mentioned about the sufganiyah going to the hamantaschen. And I would say that the hamantaschen is perhaps the least appetizing of Jewish celebration holiday foods.
I like them.
Worst cookie. You're a hamantaschen fan.
You can't get apricot hamantaschen in Israel.
Okay.
And that's my favorite. So yes.
Okay, very good. I had the joy of experiencing Purim as a young adult twice. And I think that's the best time. I think it's really made for young adults. I remember being studying abroad at Hebrew U my junior year. I remember being out on Ben Yehuda Street and it just being this raucous Mardi Gras affair. People having those plastic hammers that you hit each other with that make the noises, and the silly string everywhere going. There was a a club at the time. Perhaps you frequented this yourself, called hamantaschen, which was in Talpiot.
Yeah, I know where that is.
And I think we all went to that club all night long, and just like you said, people descending from the ceiling and a full like party going on, and it's Mardi Gras. Um, my my year in Israel perhaps was even better than that, and that my girlfriend at the time, now wife, they were having a party for Betzalel for the art academy where she was studying, and they took over the entire Israel museum. And I think that everyone was wearing like togas to think about this, and costumes, and it was an all night like drinking and dance affair at the Israel Museum outside. I mean, really, how do you not love a holiday that's like this?
Yeah.
It was yeah, a memorable experience for me. But I keep coming to the revelry, and I think that that's one of the things I really like about Purim. And I'm going to create a parallel here between Purim and Fat Tuesday and Mardi Gras within more Christian tradition, that both of them parallel in that they are at the end of a winter. It is a knock your socks off, kind of get all of your fun out, because we're about to go into a spring holiday of renewal. And in that way, there's a lot that our rabbis do to connect Purim to Yom Kippur. And we can talk a little about that, but Yom Kippur as a purification before Sukkot of the Chag, and Purim as a get your yayas out before the Chag of Passover. And I think that there is something psychologically to this of, after a long cold winter, especially as it's been here in the Northeast, of having a frivolous, fun holiday. You're dressed up, you're going out, and even, yeah, I'm explaining the young adult version of this. The kids are getting dressed up, they're going to carnivals, they're having fun.
Yeah.
It's I think it's needed at this time period, and it sets the table for Passover the way that Yom Kippur ideally sets the table for Sukkot.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely something to that. You know, it's in the month of Adar, and Adar is the month where, like, Misha Nichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha, like when the month of Adar comes, you're supposed to be happier. And which is kind of an interesting thing to be reminded of, because the story of Purim is not inherently so happy. It's really quite scary that we're in the diaspora and we're about to be annihilated. And so remember, don't worry, be happy. And so I think that Purim is a reminder that it's a mindset. You have to, even though things are pretty existential right now, we have to choose the alternative of happiness over just letting ourselves be like rampaged by the distraught. One of the things that you reminded me of is that in Israel, there's actually 2 different days of Purim. There's Purim and there's Purim in Jerusalem, which is a different day. It's celebrated a day later, because any cities that are in the wall, Shushan Purim, that's what it's called. Any city that's within a wall is to be celebrated a day later. And so one year, like one of my first years in Israel, I didn't actually know that, and I went to meet friends in Jerusalem on the day of Purim, and I was dressed up, and the entire country is dressed up for Purim, except for Jerusalem.
Because in the walled city, and
yes.
You look like an idiot.
So yes, I looked like a total idiot, and people were like, "It's tomorrow, it's tonight." But there is something about leaning into partying, I guess, in the face of what is going to be. This is a really scary moment, and we're gonna do it ad lo yeda. Like, we're gonna party until we don't know what's up, what's down, what's right, what's left. So I think that's really been embodied by the Israeli society.
Yeah, and I think that there is a very Zionist narrative that has to do with Purim, which is, and also mirrored against Hanukkah, which comes right before it. That is, Hanukkah is a story of Jews living in the land of Israel taking up arms to fight for their own sovereignty and defending off foreign oppression. Whereas the story of Purim is a story of Jews living in the diaspora. It's the one book of the Torah, Book of Esther. It's the one narrative book that doesn't have the word God in it once. It says that God does not exist in the diaspora. And what does it say? That in the diaspora, you are going to be subservient to a buffoonish king who will have no real scruples himself, but that you are going to have to give over your daughters and the best of your wears to in order to somehow seek his satisfaction and to protect you, at least in this moment until the next threat comes around. And that's, I understand in Israel why that interpretation it's very deep. It resonates with the people about the 2,000-year experiment of diaspora and trying to make ourselves as amenable or as attractive as possible to non-Jewish rulers is no longer the paradigm in which we want to live, and that Purim celebrates the past in a way that Hanukkah celebrates the present and the future. And there's a real critique of diaspora Jewry when you read Purim through that lens.
I think you can also look at it in another way, that it's like the times that we've forgotten that we're a people and that we don't access God so easily, or sometimes the time that we have to really go within and look for God so deeply. Like there's a play on words with the name of Esther. Esther is probably a Persian Zoroastrian
Ishtar, like the Dustin Hoffman movie. I'm sure you loved it.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's what I was thinking. And but the rabbis say, well, Esther is like Hester, like to hide. And so we say that, like the Book of Esther, God is very much present, but God is hidden. And it's the actions of the people that bring God's divinity to play, which I think is really something that speaks to the diaspora Jewish experience, that like we don't have the land of Israel around us and we don't have that culture around us. And if we want to find the meaning of what it means to be in relationship with God, relationship with one another, relationship with our tradition, that it's hidden from us, and then we have to seek it. We have to make it, we have to bring it out.
Right. And I'll take the Zionist other side of that, that Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, he taught that the land of Israel and the people of Israel are intertwined with one another. And when the people of Israel are in the land of Israel, the people of Israel flourish and the land of Israel flourishes. And that when they are separated, that the land grows fallow and the people grow weak. And they grow almost as ghosts or shadows of themselves. And that when they are reunited in the land of Israel, both the land flourishes and the people flourish again. Now, that is a very opinionated way to look at Jewish history, but it's not without some basis. And the Purim critique of diaspora Judaism is that it's I'm sure that you've met many Israelis in your life, as have I, have said that you Americans, you think it's so good there, but just wait. The time will eventually come, and you're going to need to come to Israel because the good times are going to come to an end as they have it, as it ended in Spain, as they've ended in Baghdad and all other places. And I know it's a very pessimistic way of looking at Jewish history. It's one that tends to reveal itself during Purim.
See, I think Purim has I think it's become more, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time finding the right words. It's become more meaningful for me, because I used to look at the story of Purim living in Israel and kind of reading it that way. Like, this is such a critique of diaspora Judaism. And now that I'm living in the Jewish diaspora, I kind of see it as a story of empowerment. We flourish when we decide that we flourish. We stand up and we overcome because we remember who we are. We don't back down. We don't pretend to be anything other than what we are. And we do that within the context of another land. And I think that speaking to this moment, which we've spoken about before on this podcast, we will, maybe the answer is to move to Israel. I think a lot of Israelis these days would say, nah, not so much. But if we lean into that narrative of of finding ourselves, even when it's really hard to, and even when it's not obvious that we can succeed, I think that there's something very calming, healing about that story.
I think I want to add another nuance to this debate. You mentioned, you quoted from Talmud, the Achelo Yada, that until someone does not know, that this idea that you're supposed to drink on Purim until you can't distinguish between Mordechai and Haman. And this is part of, there's a longer midrash, a story about a rabbi goes over to his friend's house and they drink until they can't tell one another, and the friend gets so drunk that he cuts off the other friend's head with a sword. This is actual story in the Talmud. And then he prays and revives him, and he is resurrected in this midrash. And next year, he invites the same rabbi over to his house and says, hey, let's go do Purim again. And the rabbi responds to him and says that one cannot count on a miracle to happen twice. Basically, like the drinking thing, like it's not necessarily supposed to be to such extremes. But there's another really interesting interpretation about not knowing between Mordechai and between Haman. And that is that while we often think of them as polar opposites and as sort of the hero and villain of the story, that they're actually very similar in certain ways, and that perhaps the real critique we can make of Mordecai is that he needlessly, out of pride, risks the entire fate of the Jewish people of his town. There's nothing in halakha and Jewish law that says you can't bow down to someone if they ask you to bow. Mordecai inserts himself. He tries to make himself known to Haman in a way that Haman is going to then react to him. And there's, on one side, there's to say that maybe we shouldn't be like Mordecai, who's constantly trying to provoke and poke the bear. Or is that a sign also of diaspora weakness, of being afraid to be like Mordecai and to stand your ground? So even in this Talmudic discussion, there's that same argument about what should be the place, what's the proper way of reading this as the place of the Jew in the diaspora versus the Jew in Israel.
Well, I think that's goes to like a more mystical look at the Book of Esther, and which relates to what you're saying, is that Esther is the ultimate day of, Purim is the ultimate day of discovery, because only when you're dressed up do you actually get to reveal your true self. And so only when you're really, only when something is hidden are you going to actually show the truth. And I think that maybe that's also true of the Jewish experience right now. That sometimes when we're trying to take on another identity, our real identity comes out. Our real identity shows through, even if we're trying to put on other facade. Like we know who we are inside. It's so much easier to reveal the truth about yourself when you're wearing a mask.
With trepidation, I'm going to add this to the drinking thing for a second, because I think some of the feeling is that drinking, at least in moderation, releases inhibitions that allows people to then act truthfully or say truthfully of themselves in a way that they wouldn't due to their regular inhibitions. I'm not here trying to promote heavy drinking, but I'll give a very mundane example here.
Yeah.
I'm rewatching Stranger Things with my younger daughter who just got into it, and in season 2, which I'm sure have you watched the show yet?
I have not.
When the character Nancy goes to the party with her boyfriend Steve and gets drunk, she then admits to him and tells him that she doesn't really love him and that this is all BS for her, and that is the truth coming out. So I'm speaking this in a very like haha cultural reference, but talking about the idea that the drinking and the dressing up are both, I think, a part and parcel of this idea of allowing elements of your personality to be exposed that might not other in polite society.
Yeah, and also like the Jewish people find their Judaism in the diaspora. I mean, I think we see that so much. I mean, when Israelis, it's interesting when in my rabbinical school program, a lot of the people who were in my program were people who were shlichim, who were emissaries, or who spent a sizable amount of time in America. And only when they were in America did they discover their Judaism. Before they were Israeli, they weren't Jewish. And then they came here and they discovered their Judaism. And I think that that's sometimes something that happens
Very common.
Yes. With when you're outside of the land. You take for granted what you have when you're in it. Israelis take for granted their Judaism. So their Judaism is, unless you're religious, is a peripheral part of your existence. But once you're out of the land of Israel or out of the state of Israel, that's what unites you to other Jews. That's what keeps you bound to a community, to one another. So in Persia, they found themselves. I mean, it's also what happens in the desert. The people of Israel find themselves before they even make it into land of Israel. And then once they've achieved, once they've achieved what they wanted and make it to the land of Israel, they start to fall apart. So it is, I think it's also a reminder, like there is a place, it's a dance. You're going to go forward, go backwards, go forward, go backward. You're going to long for this fulfillment of covenant, and then you're going to have it, and then you're going to break away, and then you're going to find yourselves again, and then come back to it. And I think that that's also what it means, like the hidden and the revealing all the time. We also do that within ourselves. We reveal something of ourselves, we cover it back up, we reveal, we recover. And so I think that Purim is this ultimate day of kind of breaking apart and deconstructing all of the things that we know to be true about our identity, about our religion, about who we are in our souls, and then kind of putting it back together, which I think is actually a beautiful motif in preparation for Yetziat Mitzrayim, in preparation for Passover, for freedom. Like break yourself apart in order to be redeemed.
Yeah, I think to use modern technology and modern vocabulary around this, I think that Purim is a lot about code switching, and that Esther, who changes her name from the indigenous Hebrew of Hadass to a name Ishtar, Mordechai named after Marduk, another of the Persian gods, it seems pretty Persian lives, not particularly Jewish lives, who over time then need to assert themselves and reveal themselves for who they actually are. And I think the term code switching is something that's very prevalent right now, but the way that we talk to one another, act with one another within a Jewish community versus in a non-Jewish community, I think are can be very different things, and it's very meaningful for me. I also think back, you mentioned about the Sinai, and commentator Rashi talks about why is the Torah given at Sinai. It's because the Jewish people had to leave their surroundings in order to go out into the wilderness, and only without the routines and the connections around them were they available and open to actually understanding God and entering into covenant. You and I have spoken about the fact that a lot of part of my Jewish identity was the fact that I grew up really as the only Jew in town, and to the degree to which my parents and my sister and I really had to forge a very strong Jewish identity, because we were the token Jews to lots of our community, and people would learn about, understand, make opinions about Jews based upon what we did or said. That was both very isolating and both really empowering. And for me, growing up as the only Jew in town is something I see as very additive to my Jewish identity.
Well, how do you think we can bring in some of the meaning of Purim into our community? Because I think it's so interesting to have that singular Jewish experience as somebody growing up not amongst many Jews, and to feel the story of Purim kind of in your bones in some way.
Mm-hmm.
We live in Westchester, where there's 150,000 Jews.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that Purim is one of the pillars of our Jewish practice here in our community. It's certainly fun and nice, and we celebrate it. What do you want people to get out of Purim when you think about that as a rabbi, as a Jew?
I think I have a broad critique that Purim falls under. I think that very often we market Judaism as something that's for kids. And we tell parents that it's their responsibility to teach kids about Judaism, but we then seldom challenge the parents to do the same. I'll give an example. We teach our kids stories from the Torah, very often in a very PG way, which is actually not really authentic, because stories like the Book of Esther, Esther is a hard R-rated book with lots of violence and sexual tension and all of that. But our kids often learn stories from the Torah in first, second, third, fourth grades or so.
Yeah.
And it's almost as though we have portrayed the Torah as a kid's book, almost like Aesop's Fables.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's more like reading Shakespeare.
Right.
And that our adults miss out on the content and the richness. And they look at the Torah and they say, well, that must be a rather simple book. I'm going to read, Plato's Republic instead. I'll read Nicomachean Ethics by Kant. That's like real literature. That's like real substance. And the Torah has all of that. And I think that, especially in the diaspora, Purim is a kid's holiday. Purim is when you take your kids to a carnival, this is like, again, it's an East Coast, West Coast thing. This thing about like winning fish and taking fish home. I had never seen that living like on the West Coast. That is like insane to me that
We don't do that here, right?
we used to. We used to have the fish thing here. And people in our congregation still have their fish from like 10 years back, and they keep these guppies alive somehow. But the fish tank thing was that to me was very new.
What was a West Coast Purim like?
I mean, it was all the celebration, but the fish thing was missing. We just I don't remember in Hawaii what it was really like. I just remember much more in California.
Yeah.
The fish thing was new to me when I got here. I said, "You're doing what? We're gonna give kids fish to take home? Like, are they gonna keep them? Are they gonna flush them down the toilet? What's gonna happen?" But going back to your question, I think we do a really good job here at the synagogue of teaching Purim and celebrating Purim for kids in a similar way that Halloween in the secular world is largely a kids' holiday, I think, right? When it comes to adults, there's some things we do well. We have a very active Mishloach Manot program here at the synagogue, in which we are teaching people about the values of Mishloach Manot, and it's a fundraiser for the synagogue, and that's great. I think that the other elements to it, that the reading of the Megillah and how, again, you spoke about last week about different melodies of the seasons, and to hear the sing-song, playful and yet woeful melody of chanting Megillat Esther, it's absolutely beautiful, and ties to the season. And I don't think that there's a valuation of that in our community the way that I would love that to be. And I don't think that there's the idea of taking the time of giving to the poor, that this is all the more so. Like we just sort of do it throughout the year, and that Purim is, well, it's really, I don't think most of our congregants know that. I'll say one last thing in my attempt to attach this to adults, and I keep talking about drinking, so please forgive me if people are going to hear this episode and think that I'm some heavy drinker, which I absolutely am not. But one of the other connections between this and Sukkot is that one tradition is to take Sukkot, all of your etrogim from your little etrog, and to use them to infuse vodka with it that you then keep in your fridge and you open up at Purim. No, you don't know this one? Well, I've got a little gift for you, because guess what I've been doing for the past couple of months? I have a fantastic bottle of etrog infused sweetened liqueur in my fridge that I'm gonna bust out here. So maybe
Cannot wait.
So maybe when people come here now, have you ever been to a synagogue in which they line up shots on the bima?
Yeah.
Right. That this is a thing too.
It's not my thing.
Even when I was at a Reform synagogue in California, and my first job in Fremont, outside of Oakland, all the adults came for the Purim, but all of them dressed up, and the rabbi and the lay leaders lined up shots on the bima, and people came up to participate in parts of the service. They first did a shot, and then read some of Esther, or then led some of the service, or led some of the spiel. So that. Right, it's sort of a ritualized drinking. Personally, I think that we do a very nice job in Judaism of teaching moderate drinking around special holidays and not drinking too much. And it's almost like when the bar bat mitzvah has like this little thing of Manischewitz to drink at that time, right? But that makes you uncomfortable, the drinking element, especially on the bima.
I get nervous when there's drinking and kids around, because I think that sometimes that's a place where, not necessarily in our community, but there are places where there's not so much supervision, and that's where children get started with their drinking.
I agree. I think that was popularized in a different era as well.
I agree.
I don't see many synagogues these days lining up shots.
No,
especially,
I agree with you.
There's the interpretation of the Torah says you should not put a stumbling block before the blind, and one interpretation of that is that you should not put things in front of people who suffer from addiction that might tempt them towards those addictions. And given the chance that we likely have people in the synagogue who deal with substance abuse, and to line up shots in front of them is a stumbling block before the blind.
Right. I've been to communities where they only have grape juice because of that. But that's
no fun.
That's neither here nor there. Neither here nor there.
Did people go to those communities?
Yeah, of course.
Very nice.
There was a request.
The teetotalers.
Okay, we're getting off topic.
Can I share with you another interpretation of Purim that's really meaningful to me, and talking about like bringing this to adults? I had a wonderful teacher in rabbinical school, Tamara Skenazi, a biblical scholar, and she taught that there was a basic meaning, a story that's told between the 5 Megillot of the 5 different Jewish holidays. A lot of our listeners might not realize there's actually more than one Megillah. People hear the Megillah, you think of Purim, but there are 5 different Megillot or scrolls that are read at 5 different holidays, and it's the way for us to bring in the final book of the Tanakh, Ketuvim, into our regular cycle. And she teaches it goes like this. It starts in the spring with Passover. And at Passover, we read the Song of Songs, which is about abundance and love and lust, and everything's wonderful. And it's that passion of youth. And then you turn from that towards Shavuot, and you read then Ruth, and it's from lust into like maturity and compromise and relationship and bargaining. And then after that, the third one you get to is Lamentations, which is about failure and destruction, when everything you've built and everything that you've lived towards all goes up in flames, and you're left there holding nothing. And you say, like, what has come of my life? And the fourth one then should say is that we read Ecclesiastes during Sukkot. And that's about wisdom literature. That's about looking back and saying that this too shall pass, and that there's nothing new under the sun. This has happened to other people as well. And it's about rebuilding yourself up. And then the fifth one is the Book of Esther. And then she said, well, so what does that mean? What's the interpretation for Esther? She said it's twofold. So the first one is maybe Esther's is about like really merrily, life is just a game. Like, just like, don't take yourself so seriously. And like, you're going to look back on your life and all of us go ups and downs, but like, really, you have to be able to laugh at yourself and just not take it all so seriously, which I think is a beautiful teaching. Then, but I think there's a deeper teaching to it, is that Esther has to realize in the book of Esther that it's not all about her, and that really this is about a community and about a people, and that the ultimate story of this narrative is that in life it's not all about you, and that it's about what did you do in order to lift up those around you and to be there for your friends, family, and community. And so I love that teaching of looking at the yearly cycle.
That's beautiful.
Isn't it? There's so much wisdom behind that. And whenever we reach one of those holidays and we read from one of those Megillot, I always have that narrative in my mind. And when it comes to Purim, the idea of both stop taking yourself so damn seriously and stop making it all about you, really resonate with me.
I really love that teaching so much.
Mm-hmm.
That's really beautiful. And it reminds me that in the Book of Esther, there are a few lines that you were supposed to read in the trope, in the sound of Eicha and the sound of Lamentations, because it's in conversation with one another. Mm-hmm. And you say the same line when you reach the month of Av, when you reach the saddest month of the year, Misha Nichnas Av, that you're gonna go like up in your sadness. Mm. So in the month of Adar, you go up in happiness. In the month of Av, it's not. I'm forgetting the word right now. I think it's Dar, but like no. You're going up in grief, and because it's really kind of 6 months from one another. Yeah. Like there is going to be moments of happiness, but even in your moments of happiness, remember that like it's going to be hard at times in your life, and even in moments of hardship, as you said, like after the destruction of the temple, we had this renaissance of Judaism, of rabbinic Judaism. And so life is going to ebb and flow. Your relationships are going to ebb and flow. Your relationship with God, with your community, with your Judaism is going to go up and down, going to shape shift. But I really love how you created that. I really love that the midrash, that the cycle of what life is, a cycle of relationships, a cycle of your engagement with life, with God. And
yeah,
it's gorgeous.
It reminds you that, the holiday is called Purim, and many of our congregants probably don't even know what Purim means. And Purim means lots. It's like for a lottery. And that it reminds us that like there is like life is fragile, and life, like ultimately a lot of things in life are not up to us. And again, just as much as we always connect Purim back to Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim, Yom HaKippurim, the Day of Atonement. And the Talmud has a lot of interplay between the two of those. That what do we read on Yom Kippur afternoon? Read about Jonah. And what happens to Jonah? He does the drawing of lots to see whether or not who's that on the boat that God is calling with these actions, and that you have in both the sort of a randomness, but is it really so random? Is there, a beacon within the random of life? And I think that Purim for me, and I was going very deep for a holiday that's often about giving fish to kids at a carnival.
First time Purim, I'm hearing about that.
Purim is about, trying to find the signal in the noise and trying to live in a very random, haphazard, chaotic world, trying like Esther to find your place and stand your ground and say, Hineni, here I am.
So there's going back to what you just said about Yom Kippurim. the Esther, before she has to go speak with the king, she has this long fast. And my kids used to ask me, like, are we gonna be, there is a fast of Esther. You
Yeah.
commemorate the fast of Esther by fasting.
And it's the way of fusing a relationship between her and the outside world, because she says, if I'm going to do this, I'll fast, you'll fast. And between this impenetrable wall, we will then connect with one another.
Exactly. And I think that what's beautiful about the story of Esther is that she understands her mission, and she finds the strength, and she locks into that, and she does it. And it takes her time. We all have to find our strength and lock into it and just go for it. But when you're in that space, like Esther is, there is an accountability, a reflection that has to happen. It's supposed to be like the atonement before on Yom Kippur. You're really standing before God, and you're saying, what do I stand for? What makes me tick in the world? What is my purpose? And she goes and she appeals to the king, and she succeeds. And Achashverosh is also, I think, supposed to be representative of like the king.
Yes, there's all these connections that Esther goes, beseeches the king and asks for life for her people, just as we do before Hamelech on Yom Kippur. She uses the word tokef. The word unatana tokef comes actually from Esther in the beseeching of the king. There's all of these back and forth that we are Esther in that time period. But I think, again, we've laid out so well that there's this beautiful balance between the revelry, the silliness, again, kind of get the Mardi Gras aspect of Purim, and behind it, this incredible spiritual depth about finding our place and asserting ourselves, having the strength to do so, even in a chaotic and often unaccepting world.
Yeah.
So how about this? I think that you and I could go on and on about Purim. I think we should do another episode. We're going to talk really deep dive into the Book of Esther itself. And maybe then for those who are listening to this podcast, we would encourage you. The Book of Esther is very readable and very short.
And also very surprising.
Yes, it's probably not what you remember from growing up. So take the 10 minutes it takes really to read the Book of Esther. And let's do a deep dive on that next week. Sound good?
Sounds good. All
okay,
right.
Very good. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Londy, or to connect with Temple Bethel of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Bethel NW. Thanks for listening.